What if the financial future of your organization depends on support from people you have visited only once, if ever? Would that change your focus? In today's episode, Russell and Eddie dig into the uncomfortable math behind major gifts. Why the donors most likely to transform your organization are typically the ones most fundraisers spend the least time with. I'm Casey Powell, President of Thompson and Associates, and this is the Fundraising Paradox Podcast, where the science and the real-world experience of major gift fundraising collide and reveal the same surprising truth. Here's Dr. Eddie Thompson and Dr. Russell James.
Well, welcome in, folks. Today we're going to be talking about seeking out your people group, the wealth holders. Now, that's an unusual title for a conversation about fundraising, but we're going to look at some statistics and also going to hear about real world practice and what really works from Eddie Thompson. So, Eddie, you want to say hi and introduce
Thanks.
yourself?
Glad to be here. Always enjoy our conversations, Russell.
Thanks, Eddie. So today I want to talk about something that for fundraisers, for some fundraisers, might be uncomfortable. And I say this because I feel like it is my role in the industry to say the things that you don't want to hear.
There you go.
And I say that because, frankly, I've got tenure and I'm not selling anything.
They're not going to fire you, right?
Right.
No, brother.
So the idea of seeking out your people group, the wealth holders, here is what I fight against. People love the notion that you just really need to work with other people who are like you. If you're young, work with other donors who are young, right? And the reality is that that's not how the money works, right? I don't know how many sessions I've seen about, okay, how do we engage with, Gen Z and all, like, okay, look at your donor base, right? Where is the money coming from? It's uncomfortable if I say, no, actually, you need to learn how to work with wealth holders, and you need to learn to work with people who are much older than you. That's uncomfortable. Let me throw out some statistics for you, Eddie, and I'm just interested in your reaction and how this fits with what you've seen over, well, I won't out you, but a few decades
Thanks.
in the industry. I often tell people that if you're familiar with the 80-20 rule, that 20% of your clients are going to create 80% of your business, fundraising is not an 80-20 world. It's actually, statistically, it's about an 82 world. That means 2% of your donors are going to generate 80% of the dollars. Now, this is actually coming from data from over 38,000 nonprofits. It's all the fundraising software platforms that share their data in the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. And actually, the top 2.6% of donors provides 3/4 of the money. The top 0.3% of donors provide about half of the money. As a researcher, that is the data. That is the statistics that I'm seeing. How have you seen that, or have you seen something different? And how is that a match or a mismatch with what fundraisers are actually doing?
Well, that's exactly what we find. I wonder what the true statistic would be if we could reach out to all the nonprofits around the country and gather data. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe that's something you could do in the future. I think that I say with some nonprofits it's not true. Some nonprofits are so busy going after discretionary gifts, they're not getting major gifts.
Mm.
They're just not getting them.
Mm-hmm.
Their relationships are fairly shallow. I find that most nonprofits know a few donors well, but even then, it's somewhat shallow in a relationship. I think the biggest surprise I've seen since COVID, I don't know if COVID actually drove this, is that we've relied more and more on emails, direct mail, fewer and fewer visits. I just visited with a nonprofit the other day at a hospital, big hospital, children's hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Their major gift officers and their annual gift officers average 2 visits a month.
Hmm.
And that's to wealthy donors.
Mm-hmm.
And my concern is, what are you going to do when you lose that small percent of donors who give those large gifts? Because you're going to lose them by attrition. They get tired of your organization, move on. So one of the challenges is to broaden those relationships.
Mm.
Is that what you're seeing in research too? I mean, I think it's fairly shallow.
It is definitely moving in that direction. Fewer people who are donating, and then a larger share of the dollars coming from the fewer people at the top. Now, I'm interested in your thoughts on this because I have a theory, and let me share a little bit of a story with you, and I want your thoughts on this. So we know what the numbers look like, okay? But let me run you through two scenarios and talk about the emotion of those two scenarios. Okay. Let's suppose scenario number one, you spend the next 2 years working with 100 donors. Both scenarios, you're going to work with 100 donors. In your first scenario, each has capacity to make a $10,000 gift, and each has a 75% chance of making that gift. Okay. In that scenario, you're going to raise $750,000, right? 75% chance, 100 donors, make a $10,000 gift. Now, let's take another scenario. That scenario is 100 donors, each has capacity to make $1 million gift, but their interest in giving is low. Each has only a 3% chance of making that gift. Now, in that second scenario, 3% chance of making the gift, you're going to raise $3 million, not 750,000. Now, the math is pretty straightforward on that. But what I want to talk about is the emotion. Because in scenario number one, where you're raising like less than 20, less than a third of the money, you're constantly winning. 3 out of 4 weeks, you get to bring back a big gift. In scenario number two, where you're raising 4 times as much money, you feel like you're constantly losing. On average, you're going to lose 33 times for every victory. You'll have all of your proposals rejected for about 8 months on average, right? But it raises more money when you take that approach. And what it makes me think of, so I like following different sports. And in sports, before analytics came in, and I'm a data guy, so I like analytics. Coaches and players did what felt good. They avoided the negative emotions of the negative outcome. But analytics pushed the sports to higher risk, higher reward tactics. So in basketball, that's the domination of the 3-point shot. In baseball, trading strikes for home runs. And in NFL, it went way more passing over running. The thought is this: in both sports and fundraising, the emotions don't match what the numbers say. If we focus on winning a larger share of plays or asks, it feels better. But if we're focusing on winning the biggest asks or plays or gifts, it actually works better. Any thoughts on my little tirade there on numbers and emotions?
Begin with your own words. You told us on one of the podcasts that a good podcast has pushback, right? Isn't that what you told me?
Yeah, go for
Okay.
it.
So I'm going to add a third opportunity. And I think this indicates that we're understaffed as a nonprofit. We need both because the high end donors you will lose, right? Some point in time, you're going to lose them. You may get an estate gift or something. We need to be filling that pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would suggest the answer to that is in between, where you add staff to build relationships. This concept of funneling down,
Mm-hmm.
we have a pretty narrow opening at the top. with
Mm-hmm.
donors. We need to broaden that. We need more relationships, not fewer. And so my answer would be add more staff, strengthen your major gift program, build those relationships as broadly as you can, and go after both types of gifts. Because the $10,000 donor could be a really big donor at some point in time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So play the immediate game and make the best decision. But I think the biggest problem we face is understaffed. I think most nonprofits, we make so few visits, build so few relationships that gives you that top number where you're raising an awful lot of money. But my concern is long term, because I think the first scenario is a short term analysis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think we got to start thinking as an industry long term. We
Mm-hmm.
got too much short term thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I pushed back the right amount or too
Mm-hmm.
little, or what comments you would make on what I suggested.
So absolutely, I think we're on the same page with that. Let me ask you a question,
Okay.
because I have my little pet theories. Why is that? Now, you would think in any area of investment, your CFO is going to be the person, she's going to be pushing that. Let's stuff more into this. This is a better return. And you don't see that in nonprofits and in their investment in fundraising. I mean, you have spent a lot of time in this space. So let me just ask you, why not? Why aren't we seeing that?
We don't speak their language. I think that's the biggest part. I think if we would come in with pro formas, I don't think we approach fundraising as a business.
Mm,
And CFOs are used to talking with business language. They're
mhm,
used to performance. If I invest this amount of money, here's the return I should get. And I don't like ROI. I know maybe you do. I think that's a I just don't think it works. Uh, and I love talking to CFOs. I love it. I love talking to CEOs because tell me, for example, I talked to a hospital CEO the other day. He is cutting his fundraising staff. And I asked him, I said, what is the best return on investment? Even though I don't like ROI. What is the
mhm,
best return on investment you have? So let's say your shop is less than average, and for every dollar you invest, you get $3. How often would you make that investment? And tell me any other area in healthcare that has that kind of return on investment. Doesn't exist, but we don't speak their language.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so I love pro formas where you look at the actual cost to have a fundraiser, and then you have your goal established, and then you set benchmarks. When we reach this amount of money, then we add staff. So there's ever increasing net worth while we're also increasing staff. That's language they understand. And to go in and say we need to hire more staff, and they're going to say, well, what are we going to get? We'll raise more money. Is not satisfactory. So I think the first thing is that we don't know how to talk their language. So
mhm.
let me pause and see what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that obviously should make sense and it should work. I wonder if part of it is fundamentally they don't understand what fundraisers
They have
do.
no clue.
And yet and what's worse is they think they do. They think they know what fundraisers do. And so it's like, okay, you guys are out there shaking the tin cup
Yep.
and hassling people, for money. But these people like us, so we don't have to shake that cup that often. They're still going to give as much, right? They don't. I
Well,
wonder if that's part of it.
yeah, let me add the second thing I was going to suggest because you've addressed this before. They do not think about philanthropy the way we do.
Mm,
They think about how much can you bring me before December 31
mhm,
or whatever the date is.
mhm,
They have short-term thinking, like often development offices have short-term thinking. And I think one way to help them is to understand, as we've mentioned before, if you want to be successful, You got to do what successful organizations do. Harvard didn't become Harvard because people wrote checks. And when you get them to slow down and think about it, it makes sense. But I would go back again and suggest that often they're pushed for year end too.
Mm-hmm.
I just talked to a hospital system. They have to cut $1.2 billion from their budget
Mm-hmm.
next year. 1.2. A smaller hospital, I think their daily census is about 75, not a huge hospital. They're losing $800,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you that's kind of hard to have long-term thinking when you're facing a short-term crisis.
Mm-hmm.
But the argument, we can win this argument if we go in with the right information. And we've got to help them think long term. We've gotten into this bind and we've gotten into this habit, but we've got to break it.
So in looking at this building of the donor pipeline, if you like, statistically, I can say the money all comes from the high capacity donors. But you got to have the pipeline because otherwise you're not going to get your next group of medium capacity or high capacity donors. Sometimes I put it this way. Obviously, we would all love to spend all of our time with donors who have both high interest and high capacity. Okay? We all agree on that. But here's the thing. If you've got somebody who has high capacity, but not super high interest, there's a lot of stuff we can do to make those connections, build up that interest, right? If you've got somebody with high interest and low capacity, not a thing in the world you can do to change their
That's right.
capacity,
Exactly right.
So this idea of spending more time with high capacity donors, I think emotionally might be more difficult because it's way more fun to spend all your time with people who have super high interest and they love you to death to start with, even if they don't have capacity for a gift, as compared to people who have a lot of capacity, but they're not yet really engaged with what you're doing. And so you're going to have to develop experiences for them that help with that. So emotionally, this is more fun. But statistically, if you're spending more time with high capacity folks, now they may not be big donors for you yet. They may have just been $100, $1,000 donors, right? But that, I think, is where the return for the organization is. Thoughts on that? What
Yeah.
have you seen?
Again, I would push back that that's short term.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go back to my original argument. I think we need to do a better job as an industry showing not just where we are today, but what's our potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I would agree that you've got to invest on those high end donors. I agree 100%. But I would also suggest that with integrity, I think it's demanded of us to say what excellence looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more of a laser focus.
Mm-hmm.
And I would agree with that. You got to do it. You got to do it. But to run a good shop, you've got to be building that base because you don't know of those donors who are in their 30s and 40s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we know that people make their largest commitment late in life, right? When they've
Mm-hmm.
answered the questions, do I have enough to live on the rest of my life? And what's the smartest way to give to heirs? You solve those problems, they're more likely to give. But again, they're going to rotate out.
Mm-hmm.
You got to fill that pipeline. And so while we're focused on these high-end donors,
Mm-hmm.
we have got to address who's coming next. And I think that is the single biggest fear I have for our industry, to be
Mm-hmm.
candid with you. I see it everywhere. And it's not going to work long term.
So let me get your thoughts on this, because oftentimes I will, especially working with organizations that know how to raise small gifts. When we start talking about high capacity donors, their first thought is, oh, well, yeah, get me in front of those high capacity donors. Let me find some billionaires and I'll tell them how great we are. I think a smart strategy, if you want to build your high capacity donors and high capacity donor gifts, is to lead with value. How can we provide value to those high capacity prospects? Are your current donors who are giving substantially having such a phenomenal donor experience that they want to tell other people about that phenomenal donor experience? That the way to grow is not, oh, can you just give me that billionaire's address so I can stand in front of them and tell them how great we are? That's not how that works, right? It's, can you have a donor experience that is worth the gift so that your larger donors, in terms of their financial gifts, have such a great experience that they are your source of referrals, that's how you grow it organically. Well, that's about that.
Well, when you have a great experience, you can't keep it. You got to share it, don't you? When you go to a movie that was just awesome, or a play, or a concert, or a speech by Russell James, and you're just in awe, you cannot keep that information to yourself, right? So there's a natural referral base that comes with that. So I go back to this ribbon cutting experience. When a donor feels like, and let's be honest, there are some donors that want to be anonymous. Most of us like to be appreciated. And it reminds me of a lady I worked on her estate a number of years ago, and she told me, she said, Eddie, no matter what you do, please, please don't put my name on the building.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do, would you put lights on it so people could see it at night? So there's this, what is it, the humble brag, whatever it is. We
Yeah.
love the recognition. Why? Why do we love, as my dad used to say, 98% of people go to bed at night feeling not recognized or
Mm-hmm.
not appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Why
Mm-hmm.
do we like it?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we like to be acknowledged? Why does that make us feel good? That's a fundamental question. Then, once we know the answer to that, think what that does for us as fundraisers, helping them fulfill. My lands, think about what it feels like for a donor to make a real difference, to really make a difference, and to be acknowledged for making an investment to make a difference. And I would argue that most big donors do not make gifts to charity, they make investments in people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't give to build buildings, they don't build scholarships. They give to help people. Sometimes it takes a building,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it takes an endowment or a scholarship. It's that sense of making a difference that is infectious, and you can't keep it to yourself. So what I love about your research, Russell, and your writings, is you keep coming back to this great single principle, and that's helping a donor feel it.
Mm. And one of the things that, Eddie, you and I like to talk about a lot is the comparison between wealth sharing, might call it balance sheet sharing, versus disposable income, kind of pocket change gifts. And it's funny to me when, for example, I'll talk with a nonprofit, maybe it's a CEO, and they say, well, we don't really have those kinds of high capacity donors. Now, how big is your donor list?
Yeah, yeah,
And it'll be X thousand, right?
yeah.
And like, okay,
Yeah.
you have high capacity donors
Oh boy,
already. You don't know that,
there you go.
but you have them. And I think, again, if we came back to leading with value, how can we provide value to high capacity donors? All right. Well, here's an idea. Notice this. If you are continually sharing examples and ideas about smarter ways to give with assets, stocks, real estate, business interests, exit planning for businesses, art, IRA, 401k, mineral rights, estate planning, notice what that's going to do. This is relevant for your high capacity donors that you didn't know were high capacity donors.
Absolutely.
It's one of the most powerful things about spending so much time talking about gifts of assets is that it essentially outs your donors who are the wealth holders.
Absolutely.
So I think when it comes to, well, we need some of these high capacity donors. It is not a matter of get me in front of Bill Gates and I'll tell him how great our organization is. It's a matter of doing it organically. You've already got them. If they have a great experience, you're going to have more of them.
Yeah.
And if you provide value by talking about all of these smarter ways to give with assets, you're going to be able to connect with them.
Yep. You're going to
Talk.
get the gift. You're going to get the gift. One of the other things that I love about, sounds like I'm spending a lot of time talking about how great you are. I want your head
Hey,
get
I love
big.
it. Go ahead.
But one of the things I love about your research is you help us understand, and we're going to do this in one of the podcasts. What are the characteristics of people who make these gifts?
Mhm.
Listen, there are certain characteristics that drive this type of giving. One of the key ingredients to that person with high propensity to make a gift is they love to tell their story. They love to tell you how they got where they are today.
Mhm.
They love to talk about their parents and their family,
Mhm.
and they can't help themselves. When you start seeing a person who is driven, again, not to make gifts, but make investments, they're typically people who feel deeply. And one of the things I love about my work, I meet the greatest people in the world who are wealthy.
Mhm.
And it's sometimes to be wealthy, you need money and assets. Sometimes wealth starts with family and how you feel.
Mhm.
And they tend to be more successful, don't they?
Mhm.
People who are confident, not arrogant, but confident, secure. Sometimes a little bit of arrogance in there. But I love this whole presentation about what leads to greater success. And again, we've got to go after those top end donors, invest, 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 but we cannot ignore the future. We can't just be so focused short term thinking that we can't think long term too. And we've got to do a better job selling our CFOs and CEOs that this investment is worth it.
Well, Eddie, I think that's a great place to end this episode, talking about the wealth holders and fundraising among them. So appreciate you joining today and looking forward to our next episode. So thanks everybody for joining with today's session.
That's a wrap on episode 2 of the Fundraising Paradox podcast. If you walk away with only one thing from this episode, I hope it's this: the numbers are not even close. A tiny fraction of your donors, often less than 3%, will give around 75% of everything your organization raises from individuals. And you are probably already talking to the donors who are in that 3%. So maybe the most valuable thing you can do this month isn't another mailing or another event. It's a visit. A real conversation with someone who's already shown that they believe in your mission, where you learn their story, their values, and what they want their legacy to be, instead of asking for something. But this isn't an either or. As Eddie said, you still need a pipeline of donors. The next generation of those 3% donors is being built right now. So you have to continue cultivating relationships with all of your donors. The point isn't to abandon broad-based fundraising. It's to make sure your best relationships aren't the ones getting the least attention. Remember to explore the free resource library assembled by Dr. Russell James at encouragegenerosity.com and explore the Thompson & Associates website at ceplan.com. We'll see you in episode 3 when Eddie leads a discussion about the hybrid fundraiser.